Your host, Monty SEKHUKHUNI, on Pan Africa Connect Radio. We broadcast live on YouTube today. You can reach us on panafrica.com. If you want to connect with us on the studio, please call us WhatsApp at on 062 188 0536. If you're outside the Republic of South Africa, +27 62 188 0536. This is Your Rights, a program brought to you by SEKHUKHUNI, the hunger strike that changed the South African political landscape. Mo Africa re dumela go leng teng sa tswa re bosele. This is your program where we discuss, where we're going to empower you with your rights, every right at a time. This program bridges the gaps between citizens and institutions, empower the public to understand and assess their right. So today, our conversation will be on the South African Constitution, the Bill of Rights. In between, we'll also reflect the similar rights that we have in the African Charter, in the African Union's Charter, for us to reflect and look into the differences and similarities between the Bill of Rights that we have as a continent. It's exciting as we start the Women's Month. It's also exciting that all the African countries, the 54 states in Africa, have actually signed the Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights. That's one area that we need to take further as South Africans and Africans, wherever we are, in the continent and in diaspora. Yarmo Africa, Bosile. This program will focus on, of course, the issue of civic education, human rights, and social justice. So as we look into the South African Constitution, we'll reflect on the Bill of Rights that are enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. So as far as we know, there are about 37 rights that are there in the Constitution. We'll take them one by one. If you want to join in the conversation, please feel free to do so. Kiwa ho Monty SEKHUKHUNI, your host of Your Rights program. So without further ado, as we know that South Africa adopted this constitution in 1996, which is seen as the best in the world, which is seen as one of the constitutions that enshrines the Bill of Rights. I always say to people, South Africa is a country where all rights are guaranteed. You can say whatever that you want to say about the sitting presidents. You will definitely go sleep at home. So it's a type of country and rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. So as I take you through this journey, reading each right one by one, but let me start by saying that out of the 37 rights, or 39 if you like, that goes to issues of enforcement of the rights by the state and by institution, and also interpretation of the Bill of Rights. So in Africa, the Bill of Rights is the cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. The state must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. The rights in the Bill of Rights are subject to limitation contained in Section 36 of the Constitution. As you know that everybody has rights, but rights goes with responsibilities, and rights are not endless. It has limitations on what to do, not to do. And as we express and exercise our rights, it's important that we do not forget that we must not infringe on the rights of other South Africans or other nations in the Republic. What we do, what it means is that if you decide to march peacefully, don't affect others, don't infringe in the rights of those who don't too much. So that's what is basically based, that for every right there are responsibilities. So the Constitution in Section 8 in the Bill of Rights tells us its application. It says that the Bill of Rights applies to all laws and binds the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary and organs of states. Which means that the Constitution gives a framework, gives a governance framework on how these rights must be expressed and be protected by all arms of government, which is the legislature, the national parliament, the executive, which is the cabinet, and the judiciary, which is the courts and the judges. Also, it says that in addition, and all organs of states. That includes your Chapter 9 institutions, that includes provincial governments, that also speaks about local governments or municipalities. So it's quite important that we understand these rights. Let's educate ourselves so that we continue to maintain our rights, especially understands how they are applied, and of course how they're interpreted by the courts. So it further says that the provision of the Bill of Rights binds a natural or juristic person, if and on the extent that it is applicable, taking into account the nature of the right and the nature of any duty imposed by the right. In order to give effect to a right, or before I go there, when applying a provision in the Bill of Rights to a natural or juristic person, in order to give effect to a right in the Bill of Rights must apply, or if necessary, develop the common law to extend that legislation does not give effect to that right. May develop rules of the common law to limit the rights, provided that the limitation is in accordance with Section 36(1) of the Constitution. A juristic person is entitled to the rights in the Bill of Rights to an extent requires by the nature of the rights and the nature of the juristic person. So what it means here in Africa, it says that as the rights are guaranteed and must be protected by the states and its institution, it's important that we know that these rights have limitations. And in that limitations, it means that the state can actually limit rights, but under certain conditions. We should talk about as we go down the discussion. So it's quite fundamental that this application be understood, that it is not a free for all. It means that as you exercise your rights, you must actually exercise your rights within the Bill of Rights. But it also means in the application of this Bill of Rights, it advises us that whatever law that the government will pass must be consistent with the Bill of Rights, which means there's no legislation that must contradict or be in direct opposite with what the Constitution says. And as human beings, as natural person or juristic person, we are guaranteed all these rights in the Constitution. So as we pause now and take a break, we'll reflect on other rights that are there in the Constitution. Muslim Africa, if you want to get in touch with us, we are at Pan Africa Connect. You can listen or reach us on www.panafricaconnect or call us on 062-118-0536. This program is proudly brought to you by SEKHUKHUNI, the hunger strike that changed the political landscape in South Africa. Let's have a break. Let's have some music whilst we massage and think ourselves also going to enter and talk briefly about equity and the equity in the Bill of Rights. What does it mean to us? I'm not the advocate. I know that Woselem Africa, welcome back. You are still with your host, Monty of Your Rights. We're on PanAfricaConnectRadio.com. We're on 062-188-0536. If you're outside the Republic, it's +2762-188-0536. Before we get into the rider speaks about equity in the South African Constitution, let's just reflect on what the African Charter on Human and People's Rights says in its preamble. We'll read few of them to look into the relationship, the consistencies between what African state says, or which African states are supposed to be doing their countries, and in relation to, in particular, the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. So in the African Union, the Charter on Human and People's Rights, Article 1 directs the member states of the African Union parties to present the Charter shall be recognize the rights, duties, and freedoms enshrined in this Charter, and shall undertake to adopt legislative and other measures to give effect to this Charter. So as you can see and hear in Africa, it says to us that all African states are encouraged or are directed to ensure that it recognizes the rights, duties, and freedoms in this Charter. And national states must actually ensure that they adopt and give effect to legislation that will protect these rights. In Article 2, it says every individual shall be entitled to the enjoyment of the rights and freedoms recognized and guaranteed in the Charter, without distinction of any kind, such as race, ethnic group, color, sex, language, religion, political, and any other opinion, national and social origin, fortune, birth, or other states. So it means that we can't be discriminating amongst ourselves based on ethnicity, based on religion, based on color, based on sex, based on political opinion or affiliation, or social origin. So we need to ensure that as part of our growth as nations of Africa, we ensure that our constitutions, there is legislation effect to ensure that these rights actually enshrined. Also, in Article 3, it says every individual shall be equal before the law. Every individual shall be entitled to equal protection of the law. So which means that not all of us are equal in the eyes of the law, and all of us are equal before the law. So the law should be the law of the people, not the law of the elites. So of course, in our conversations in this in the near future, we'll get our specialists, we'll get our experts to try to dissect and unpack what does it mean that every individual shall be equal before the law. And after look into experiences, look into what has been happening both in the continent and in South Africa, and reflect and see how best can we improve, ensure that every citizen enjoy and these rights are protected. So without any further ado, I'll skip Article 4 and go to Article 5. It says every individual shall have the right to the respect of the dignity inherent in a human being and to the recognition of his legal status. It means that we must protect our dignity. The state must protect our dignity. It must be treated as humans. As you know that we are a continent that comes from colonialism, the effects of slavery. What Article 5 tells us that we need to undo all these things and ensure that what we do as Africans, it's in relation in how we treat ourselves with dignity, respect each other, and take care of each other. And no one must be abused and humiliated, irrespective of form or shape. So in Africa, this program, remember, is brought to you by SEKHUKHUNI, the youngest strike that changed the South African political landscape. So coming back to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. In Section 8, it speaks about equality. This is what it says in this section. Everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law. You can hear directly that this is consistent with what the African Union encourages or direct member states to do. So we should be glad that the South Africans that we've actually put this right in the Constitution. It's not the right that comes necessarily from legislation, but it means that everyone should be equal before the law and everyone must be protected and benefit from the law, which means that we must have laws that works for us as human beings, the laws that does not discriminate, the laws that put us into a situation, into a state where all of us feel as humans, as South Africans in our own state, so that there's no any other type of an individual who should be perceived as better or superior than the others. It further says that equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms. To promote the achievement of equality, legislative and other measures designed to protect or advance persons or categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination may be taken. The state may not unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on the grounds or more grounds, including race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sex orientation, age, disability, religion, conscious belief, culture, language, and birth. So what we are learning here, or what we are learning from the authors of the Constitution in the country, it says that the state cannot be discriminate. It means that all of us should have an equal opportunity to contest for the same case that is a workplace. You cannot be discriminated because of age. If you're 50, you still want to work, you can still apply and get a fair chance for yourself also to be processed with regard to labor relations or recruitment and selections processes of whatever institution. That must not be done, must not be discriminated against. Even if our sisters, our mothers, our ladies, cousins are pregnant, they cannot be discriminated because of the status of their situation of being pregnant. So they must be treated as full as human beings. And they also have a right to participate in everything. Because if you are married or unmarried, you cannot be discriminated against. I think we know that the history of South Africa in general of Africa, but it was just juxtaposed mainly in the South African context. That you know that South Africa has a number of ethnicity, number of groups. There are a number of people who comes from somewhere in the continent and also in the world. That refers to issue of social religion, the issue of the apartheid, where you come from, and colonialism. So which means that we cannot be discriminated based on our color. So it's time that we reflect on this equity. This rider speaks about equity. Whether are we moving in that particular direction? Colleagues, members who are citizens who are of sexual preference that they choose cannot be discriminated against. Even if on disability, we know that there's legislation that says companies across, including government, should at least hire people with disability, at least in the total of their workforce, the 2% of that workforce should include persons with disability. The issue of religious consciousness, you can't be discriminated because of your secular state or based on belief or birth or language. Language shouldn't be an inhibitor for people to progress in life or to progress in social settings. As we know that most of us in the continent, especially in South Africa, English is not our first language as an advanced argument, so that people who can speak Xhosa, Venda, Sotho, Tswana, that doesn't mean that they are of less value or cannot speak any other language. So language is also treated as equal. As we know that in the country we have 12 official languages, the 12th one which includes sign language. The further says no person may unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone or more grounds in terms of what I've just mentioned. And of course, legislation must be enacted to prevent or prohibit any form of unfair discrimination. These are issues that will unpack with those that will be getting to the studio. It's just unfortunate that today our guests could not make it for reasons beyond their control. So therefore, these are issues that will unpack over and above what the Constitution speaks about and reflect whether the constitution and legislation that's enacted, they are consistent, they support one another. As I already mentioned, that legislation cannot contradict the constitution. Discrimination on one or more of the grounds listed in what I've just said above will be unfair unless it's established that the discrimination is fair. So this one decimeter that we need to have a conversation about fair and unfair discrimination, which is one topic that I think is thorny. It's one topic that is sometimes misunderstood. It's some topic that sometimes is taken into a political context or racial connotations, racial overtones and other undertones. So it's one of the topics that we'll engage on and look into. But also I want to promise you, good listeners, that as we've started the Women's Month, we'll focus on the rights of people in the Republic. As we know, the preamble of the Constitution of South Africa states it very clearly. South Africa belongs to everyone who lives in it. So we'll converse on these particular issues and have a relationship between how does we see. Of course, there's reality and there's perceived reality, and that is the legislation that will unpack in future our own guests. In Section 21, it says freedom of movement and residence. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement. Everyone has the right to leave the Republic. Means that you are free to leave South Africa. You can go to Botswana, Mozambique, Canada, and so forth. You've got the right to a passport. So there's no state that will deprive your right to leave the country. So you're not inhibited. So that's the freedom of movement and freedom of residence. Every citizen has the right to enter, to remain in and reside anywhere in the Republic. So it means that those that come to the country have the right to come here legally, come with their documents, and then they can live wherever they wish to choose in the Republic of South Africa. Same applies to South African citizens who can live anywhere and everywhere, anywhere in the country. As we know that before democracy, there were Group Areas Act, people like me and you, who are Africans, who are black in skin color, who are coffee-like, who are brown. There were designated areas for us, and then the whites were given the prime land to sit in. But this constitution guarantees us freedom of residence, freedom to reside anywhere in the Republic of South Africa. So you can go and live there. Those who love 17 can go to 17. Those who love Margate can go there. Those who love Mklanga can go and reside in Mklanga. There's no limitations, as long as you afford the area. Of course, as I mentioned, that the foreigner says that every citizen has a right to a passport. Apply a passport. Africa. Let's mingle with our brothers and sisters in the continent. Let's learn from each other. So if indeed when you travel, you learn very quick and faster. You also learn from other people's experiences and histories and how they resolve their own societal problems. So let's apply and leave the Republic and learn from other people. So by Bafet, I mean all genders, by the way. Section 22 speaks about freedom of trade and occupation. Also quite important. Every citizen has the right to choose their trade. Trade, occupation, or profession may be regulated. Fundamentally, what it says that if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be an engineer, you can be an engineer, belong to a particular occupation free of charge. Nobody must tell you that you are limited to be a lawyer, you are limited to be an engineer. You can choose your own profession. And remember that all these professions have regulations. There are professional bodies that we belong to, that this profession serves. So these are things that we'll talk also about the value of these professions. Is it only about annual contributions, or are they also dealing with matters that affect our performance at work, or will they assist us in terms of researching the growth of the profession whilst we've chosen this particular profession? Of course, it's important that let's not forget the profession that gave birth to other professions. Teachers, I always say so. That's the profession that gave birth to other professions. So we all have to choose our own trade. The state won't actually limit you, which leads to Section 29, 23 that deals with labor relations. Briefly says everyone has a right to a fair labor practice. These are things that we talk about. There's an issue of for equal work for equal value. The right to ensure that you are treated fair, you're not discriminated or not harassed in the workplace. It further says that every worker has a right to form and join a trade union. These are choices of expression, freedom of expression that we have. You can form a political party, join it. You can form a trade union, join it, and participate, of course, in its activities. It further says that you can participate in the strike. So if you decide to strike in your workplace, of course, there are regulations, there are processes of how to lead up towards a strike. So it's quite important that you understand that, and also those of us who are into unions, that let's not take our workers, our fellow colleagues into unprotected strikes. People have lost jobs before, but also as we do the striking, we need to do them in a very peaceful, respectful within the Bill of Rights. Every employer has a right to form and join the employers association. It's not talking about the companies. They can also do the same. Start an organization, start a company. They can belong to also organizations of a particular trade. They can form their business forum, chamber of commerce, and so forth. So you can see that there is a balance in the Constitution in terms of the Bill of Rights, which does not emphasize or sees the other one as better than the other. So there's a one that 24 speaks about the environment, which is quite key as well, that everyone has a right to an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being. As we normally argue, some of us, where we have conversations with our peers, is to say that health is not the absence of disease, but the environment that we live in actually will cause us to be unhealthy. So it's quite important that we live in a peaceful, harmless environment, and our well-being must also be not in a situation where the environment makes us to have the environment protected for the benefit of present and future generations. It's quite important that we know that we must take care of our environment. I think that's what this bill is saying. Even if those of us who are involved in the development space, building infrastructure and so forth, we need to, as we do that, ensure that it's done within these particular rights. We don't destroy the environment as we try to build new spaces, but we must maintain that environment, ensure that our people are not experiencing, are prevented from pollution and ecological degradation. Must promote conservations. You know that those NPs always complain that if they want to lay, especially those in the telecoms industry, to lay fiber, they go through a number of processes because of it's an environmental issue. You're going to dig trenches there. It's quite important that you know that once you've dig trenches, before you do that, there's an environmental study. Is it safe to do so? Once you are done, you reinstate the place, and it becomes habitable. We don't actually destroy or create a harmful environment. Then Section 25 has been a very thorny one in the country, of course, over the years, where we discuss, I think in Parliament there's an issue of property rights. So this is one topic that also I think more than often turns political, of course, but because as the station we promote knowledge, we empower you with your right at the time. We'll engage on those particular issues, but we don't want to be a political matter per se, but we want us to talk about what does it mean to property rights, what does it mean to own a property, what are your responsibilities when you own a property, what is expected from you. It's quite important that as we know that in terms of this property right, it also relates to land tenure. The property goes with land, of course. There might be issues of title deeds as well, that when you have a property, how often, when you get a title deed, bonded houses, government provided houses, and so forth. So we'll have this conversation and juxtapose this thing. And actually reflect, of course, on the importance of the property. Remember that land in itself is property. People think that property is just buildings, but property also, land is also property. As it says, a property is not also limited to land. So we'll have those conversations, which takes me to Section 26, that is about housing. everyone has the right to have access to adequate housing. Everyone has a right to access to adequate housing. The state must make reasonable legislation to ensure this. This one, let's not get much into it. It's one issue that, of course, we'll discuss. If possible, we'll get those that in the space, in the human settlement space, from government, from developers, even if ourselves, property owners, ratepayers, we'll talk about this thing. Section 27 speaks about healthcare, food, water, and social security, which states that everyone has a right to have access to healthcare services, including reproductive health care. And subsection B says that everyone has a right to access to sufficient food and water. Hey, you think our time is not so good, but it's just to explain to you the Bill of Rights what is contained. Section 33 speaks about justice administration. Everyone has a right to administrative action that is reasonable and procedurally fair. As we spoke earlier on about everyone must be seen to be equal in the eyes of access to courts. It relates to that particular section. Section 35 speaks about arrest, detained, and accused persons, which says everyone who is arrested for allegedly committing an offense has a right to remain silent, to be informed promptly of the right to remain silent and of consequences of not remaining silent. Note that one, of consequences of not remaining silent during an arrest. Baitsanapi, bomajiani, the lawyers, what does it really mean? So that are important two rights that I want to conclude with is 36 and 37. Section 36 speaks about limitation of rights. Let me read it quickly. It says, the rights in the Bill of Rights may be limited only in terms of the law of general application, to the extent that the limitation is reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society based on human dignity and factors. It's not me, it's there in the Constitution. Your rights are limited. The most important one that we've recently experienced in the past 3 years or so, it says about state of emergency. Quickly says, a state of emergency may be declared only in terms of an act of parliament. The life of a nation if the life of a nation is threatened by war, invasion, general insurrection, disorder, natural disaster, or public order. This you know, Mukhaito, that is, if you remember the COVID period, the lockdown issues, I think this is one of the clauses in this is one of the section that the president and the cabinet used to actually effect the state of emergency. Mo Africa bo sele itshwara ga botse ke mo on pen connect.com 062 188 0536. Bosile, Jambo Africa.